time. It's our time, my friends. Time for millions of maturepreneurs, 55 plus, who are hashtag not done by a long shot, to revolutionize how we lead, do business, and innovate our world. I'm your host, Jeanette Anderson, and welcome to my conversations with fascinating people who would rather inspire than retire. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Maturepreneur podcast. I'm your hostess, Jeanette Anderson, and I'm here today with Gregg Lunceford, who's joining us from Chicago. Very hot there right now, I understand. And welcome, Gregg. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Jeanette. I appreciate the invitation to be on your show.
Today, we're going to be talking about exiting from work. So those of you who are still working and looking to figure out how to do that, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about what to do after that. And I'm going to tell you, as always, some more information about Gregg so you can decide whether or not you want to bother listening. Then we're going to find out the juicy, salacious details about his life in the background. And, you know, I always say salacious because I'm always hopeful, but hardly anyone ever gives me any salacious details or juicy details. Anyways, we'll find out more about them. And then we're going to launch into our topic about basically financial planning, financial preparation for retirement, and really just what do you do and how do you get ready and how do you deal with it? And how do you leave work when you are ready to leave work? And wherever else we end up going. So let me tell you more about Gregg. I'm just going to bring this over here. There we go. Gregg Lunceford has 32 years of financial services experience. He's the managing director, wealth advisor at Mesirow Wealth Management. Did I say that right? Mesirow or Mesirow?
Mesirow.
Mesirow, okay. Wealth Management, vice chair of the Mesirow DEI Council, and author of Exit from Work. What will the new you look like? He develops financial planning strategies for individuals, families, organizations, athletes, and business owners. Gregg chairs the American Heart Association's Investment Committee, serves on boards at the Juvenile Protection Association, and Loyola University, holds a BA, MBA, and PhD, is a certified financial planner, and regularly speaks on WGN's radio, Your Money Matters. Holy crap, Gregg, do you ever sleep? Like, seriously.
I get a little in every once in a while.
That's a lot of busyness and a lot of different groups and organizations that you support and are part of. And that's a long time in the financial planning industry. You've gone through many of the dips. I was a financial planner for a couple of years and went through 2008. Not fun. So congratulations on
Thank you so much.
Being in this tumultuous industry for so long. So now tell us something about you we wouldn't guess from reading your website or listening to your bio or even reading your book.
One thing that people are surprised to know that most don't know is that I have a twin. So I often get mistaken. He lives in another market, but every once in a while someone will search. As a matter of fact, it just happened 2 weeks ago. I get a phone call from one of my classmates from graduate school. So I've been out of graduate school for like over 30 years. And he goes, I think someone broke into your social media and they're trolling you. And he was following my brother. I'm thinking he was following me. So,
what industry is your brother in?
He's a physician. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So interesting. Yeah. Well, there is a lot of that goes on where people just take other people's photos. So good of him to let you know. That's interesting. And so fraternal twins or identical? Must be
fraternal.
Oh, okay. Okay. So tell us a little bit about why you do what you do, because we usually start with that. We want to know your life purpose. We jump in at the deep end here. So what's your life purpose, Gregg? What's your why?
Well, as you go along your journey, as we discussed, your life purpose changes. So, I think back to my 20s, my life purpose was to make a mark in financial services and have a great career. Along the line, and you just mentioned that 2008 period, something very transformative happened to me, and that is I became very curious about work transition, i.e., the transition into retirement. And I felt as though that people were being forced into, or felt the need that they had to be forced into a certain category to do what they saw other people do historically. And this was not a joyous occasion for a lot of people. A lot of people enjoy work, and we can dive into that a little bit more as we go on. So my life's purpose has been since about 2012, even a little bit before that, but I began the formal studies around the end of 2012, is to get people to understand what retirement is from a 21st century context and help people redefine themselves and in the period and redefine what retirement is for them. As a matter of fact, I hate using the word retirement, but we haven't found one to replace it yet. I see you even mentioned retirement and all that. Well, one of these days we'll figure something that fits. But the fact of the matter is, it is a fabulous time if you understand what it is and what you were able to do in it, which I think a lot of people think that it's a period where you're going to old age and you're confined to a wheelchair, which is not the case anymore.
No, not at all. Well, and yeah, I often say retirement is so 1950s and so not the case at all anymore, that people's lives looked like it did then, but we haven't updated our file because we're told that you go to school and then you go to advanced education and then you ideally get a degree or something like that. Then you get a career and you go on the fast track and you advance in your career and you get married and you have 2.5 kids and a white picket fence and then you retire. And that's how it's supposed to go. So 1950s, so not the case, hasn't been the case for decades. And probably longer, and is such an outdated notion and harmful one, actually, because a lot of people really struggle with retirement. So yeah, I have all sorts of
and a lot of it feeds into ageism, which is very real, right? So we want to get rid of that negative connotation.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of people who do retire, 1 in 3, struggle with mental health issues when they retire. Because we're not done. That's why that is correct. Tagline for my entire business is #not done by a long shot. So let's talk about let's start with the book. What's the premise of the book and what do you talk about in the book?
So the book is a practitioner piece that I put together following my PhD research. And so how I started on this journey, it is 2008, it's the real estate bust, it is the Great Recession, the financial collapse. And what was happening at that time was I was a wealth advisor. I was with another organization, and people were coming in to have consultations with me. And the consultation went sort of like this. I work for XYZ organization. I'm an executive. We're doing some layoffs, and I got this very generous early exit package. And can you help me? I'm looking for a financial advisor to help me with this. And so what I found is that we would have these conversations. We would do all the analysis and all of the work. They would ask for another meeting to go through another scenario with numbers. And finally, we was going, the sales cycle is taking a long period of time. We've given them all the evidence we typically give a client or a prospect in this case, but why is this taking so long? And so I mentioned that to my firm, and the feedback I get is they're probably talking to you and a number of other competitors, which was true. It was probably, they got a list of 2 or 3 people, and they said, well, you could shorten the process. If we discount, they'll pick us because all things equal, they're going to go and look at it from a cost standpoint. When we go through that, we discount, nothing changes. And so I became very curious about what happens, and I started looking for literature and research about what goes on in a person's head when they get to the end stage of a career, and how do they process information and what they're looking for? Because I was like, it would help me in this situation. What I found was there wasn't a lot of literature out there, at least at the time. There still is a gap in research, in my opinion, but things have gotten a little bit better through things like your podcast and other things. But what it came down to was when I looked at retirement, at that point in time, it was largely studied through the lens of gerontology. And what it really looked at is the aging process. And that is so 1950s, to use your expression, because in that period of time, it was the aging process because you left in your 60s and your life expectancy was maybe another 10 years. And half of those years weren't always good years. So what was happening was in the 1950s, 60s, parts of the 70s, people were really developing a bucket list, what we call a bucket list. So by default, I got 10-year life expectancy, 5 years of them may not be healthy years. So I'm going to cram as much life as I can into these 5 years. Right. And then people approached you as if they were doing you a favor by giving you these 5 years. Right. And so what happened was people would make these comments to me. It's like, yeah, I'm 62, so I guess I got to retire. And I'm going, why do people feel that way? What I started to realize through my research is we now have a longer life expectancy. So I know it's a little different for all of us, but I just go off of the IRS actuarial table when they're calculating RMDs, which assumes a lifespan of 90 years old. So I'm like, no bias here. This is what the IRS. So if we are calculating required minimum distributions, and we say that the average age or expectancy is 90, then if I'm 60, I'm not entering into old age, I'm really middle age. And so what did you tell your 40-year-old self? Did you tell your 40-year-old self you only had 5 years to figure out what you wanted to do before it was over? You didn't. In middle age, this is a period of thriving, right? And we need to redefine this space and figure out things that are unique to us and meaningful and provide purpose to us to get through it versus being dictated to of what we have to do. And so that's the purpose of the book. That's the purpose of my research. When I work with clients from a wealth advisory standpoint, if I see someone that struggles with this, I make them aware of what some of my findings were and point them in directions where they can get a more holistic experience.
I love it. You're definitely speaking my language and what I'm definitely all about. What was your PhD in? What was the topic or the?
My PhD is in management. My research focus is retirement transition. So in particular, the retirement transition in the 21st century. So there's a lot of literature out there about retirement, but it is not in modern day context. And so a number of things have changed. One, we've already addressed, we're living longer. Number two, there are fewer safety nets. So corporations don't give pensions like they once did. So the ownership is on us. Many countries, their social nets are changing. So whether it be you're in the United States and you're wondering how long Social Security will last, or you're in France and they just told you that your retirement age just went to early 60s, which causes protests and all that. The interesting thing about this is, Jeanette, this is a global phenomenon. Mm-hmm. All right. So we may live in different countries that have different policies or whatever, but the thing that makes this common to all of us is all of our life expectancies are going. Some of us are going to have more resources than others. Some of us are going to live in countries that have different policies. But the reality is this is happening to all of us, and we have to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a similar impact around the world. It's exacerbated based on the economy that people are in, but it is time to redefine it because, like you said, it's now middle age. People, in theory, there's futurists are prognosticating that people who are born now will live to 130, which means that 60 is not even middle age. You haven't even hit middle age yet. And the problem is most of us didn't save up because that notion was so ingrained in us that you hit 65, you die by 75. So they only save for 10 years and they're going to live an additional 20 beyond that in many cases. But beyond just the economics, it's about meaning. It's about vitality. It's about purpose. It's about who am I now that I'm not who I've been my whole life, and how do I create this next chapter? And it's a whole identity internal shift. What's the purpose going forward? As you probably know from your research, the World Health Organization says that not having purpose takes 7 years off of our life. And we're less healthy, less vital, less well when we don't have meaning in our life.
That is exactly right, and I can confirm those facts from the research that I've done as well. So one of the questions I ask people, Jeanette, is like, how old were you when someone first that you can recall someone asking you what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Oh, goodness. Well, if they still ask me that question, I still give them. And I'm 65 now, and I still literally give them 3 or 4 answers about the things I want to do before I die. But yes, I do remember when I was young and people would ask me, and what I did become is not, or what I said I wanted to become is not what I became.
But my point is, somewhere, and I don't know what age it was for you, but it had to have been somewhere around elementary school. It could have been earlier than that. Someone is starting to ask you to think about what you want to be in life, i.e., you're forming identity.
Yes.
And the point being is they're asking you that, and you're getting all this coaching along the way. Your teachers are asking you that, your parents are asking you that, your pastor is asking you that, the person at the corner store is asking you that. Then you get to a middle school or high school and you get assigned a counselor that helps you with that. You get to college or trade school or whatever you do, you're going to be given a peer mentor or someone else to counsel you through that. Then you're going to enter into whatever you do, and you're going to get somebody either formally or informally that you want to emulate, or someone who can help you develop your career path and get to the objectives and goals you want. And then something happens, you turn about 40 or 50, and no one is talking to you about your advancement or development as a real, and people look at it as, well, that's your career, they're going to be retired soon. What we don't understand is those conversations are key to your identity as well. And so what happens is this period of exit from work, and when I say exit from work, I want to be very careful because I want people to understand it doesn't mean that you stop working. There are actually 2 retirements. Some of them happen simultaneously. Some of them happen years apart. But there's when you physically leave the business, and the other one is when you psychologically let it go. And some people are physically trying to redefine their life to something, but that doesn't mean they psychologically want to let go of their identity. What they're trying to do is a way to do it on their own terms. And so who helps you figure that out?
Exactly. And there aren't a lot of conversations around it. And I define our why different than a lot of people, because a lot do tie it up in with what we do. And so therefore, when people are not what they've been doing, then who am I? I'm not what I've been doing. Right. And so I believe our purpose and our why is more about who we are being in the world consistently through our whole life, and how we bring that and express it in the various stands that we take, or the different iterations of our life. So, we express our purpose in our family, in our church, in our business, in school, etc., all the different stages. And when we can tap into what that is, what is that consistent thread that weaves through the tapestry of our life, then we can live into that and make sure that that's our self-identification, or that consistent thread is there. We don't feel quite as adrift as when we are identified with a job as being right. Our identity. So in your research and in the work that you've done, and the book, what were some of the biggest challenges for people that made transitions out of their current work into whatever it was? So whether it was full-time retirement, whether it was a business, whether it was another career, whatever it was, what was the biggest challenges for people?
So one of the bigger challenges, there were a few findings there, but one of the bigger ones, and this one was probably the most eye-opening and shocking to me at the same time, was that a lot of people resent the word retirement.
Yeah.
And so because the retirement, when it started, more formally, I should say, it is hundreds of years old. I won't bore you with that. But when it became more formal is when we became an industrial economy. And so what happened was we went into this manufacturing era, and management wanted people who could move the assembly line the fastest. And so there became this bias towards older workers, where before there had been a bias towards younger workers, where before they had been an appreciation for older workers because of the wisdom they brought into the workplace. And so this is where ageism becomes, I guess goes on steroids or whatever. So before it would be we valued your contribution, your thought leadership, and all that. Management science comes in and takes the thought leader out and basically says, I'm going to put a production manager on the floor, and all they're going to do is make sure that the widget goes in the right hole at the right time down the line, so on and so forth. So what happens is retirement systems get created as this negotiation between management and labor. Management wants the younger worker. Unionized labor wants the older worker to be rewarded. And so what happens is they come up with this pension system. And the pension system is just to make sure, is just to buy you out so that you are not what they perceive to be a liability in the workforce. Because when you get older, you might put the nail in the wrong place, and it may take us all day to get it out of the machine. So you're a liability, which wasn't true. But the base rate of retirement is tired. Yeah. And so basically what you're telling this group of people that you've extracted value from for decades, that now you're useless. And so the early retirees kind of, took an offense to this. And so one of the things that was shocking to me is people still view it that way. We tell them with all this excitement, like, wow, you're going to get to retire, because in our younger years, we would enjoy to have a day off. We would love to have a day off, but that's not how they're perceiving it. So that was shocker number one. The shocker number two was, as I mentioned to you earlier, when we were talking about when was the first time someone talked to you about your career, most people, especially if you were in a period of economic expansion in your career, so the 50s and 60s definitely were that. 70s were too. The 80s, we had global economic slowdown, but then you had the go-go 90s with the dot-com. If you were in those periods, there was great career opportunity for you. And usually someone put their arm around you and said, you know what, I think there's a job in another division or another city, another state that would be great for you. You could be helpful. This will help your career. So you had a mentor that helped you through the process. Even before you got to that process, you got to have a counselor in high school. You got to have one in college, and so on and so forth. So for a lot of people that play lots of meaningful roles out there, this is the first decision you ever make independently, because you're in your 60s now, that mentor is gone, and it's hard to believe that you could have someone who is highly accomplished, but is having a difficulty making a career decision. And you go, how does that happen? You've had all these achievements in your career, but we have to recognize that the transition, at the late stage transition, may be the only one that they've ever made independently, because that mentor is now not there anymore, as well as is irreversible. Because
what do you mean by it's irreversible?
Well, if you are a senior in your role, regardless of what that role may be, you could be the senior fry cook. But if you get in retirement for 6 months and you say, hey, I don't like this, your role is gone. There's someone 20 years younger than you that has been waiting for your chair. They're not going to give it back. Yes. And so this is a very scary experience when people think through it. What if I'm wrong? What if I miss? Especially if they don't have the will and desire to do it. They just feel like they're obligated to.
Yes. Well, yes, there's about 3 or 4 things in there that I want to unpack. One of them is there is a trend that's changing that possibility of being able to go back. It used to be that you couldn't go back because they don't want to pay your consultant rates or higher rates. They can get someone to do it. Granted, they don't bring the context, the expertise, and the experience that you have, but they think that they're going to get it comparable work for less. But what's happening right now is, from my understanding, used to be 200 people would come into the workplace for every 100 that left. back in the 50s, 60s, and beyond. Now, 80 are coming in for every 100 that are leaving. And so we're going to have an employee crisis or an employee shortage.
Correct.
Very soon. We're starting to have it already, and we're going to have more of it as that continues. So what do you see as the impact of that in terms of people's options when they reach that retirement age, quote unquote, or as they're redefining options down the road?
I think this is an excellent opportunity for employers who recognize this and are willing to be creative around it now, as well as employees. So you're exactly right. If you look at the boomer cohort, it is, even though it is not the largest cohort in the workforce, it is a significantly large cohort that can't be replaced by new workers coming in. And Generation X is much smaller relative to the boomers. So those who are ready for senior leadership roles, regardless of the industry, they're just not going to be enough of them. Now, I think there's a challenge, and I think it varies by country. If you are in a system where policy is structured such that you are afraid to approach a valued employee before they tell you, hey, I'm out of the door completely, and they may tell you that because they feel that's the only option they have. But if you were to pull them aside and say, I've been thinking, and what do you think about coming in as a consultant or go 20 hours? I mean, you run the risk of being sued for ageism, right? So the employer, from a policy standpoint, even though they may think this is a great idea, they are not incented to approach the employee with it. Where I've seen the most success in some of our happiest clients or friends and people like that are those who have the courage to approach the employee and say, you know what, these are the things that I can do to bring value to you. And this is why you should consider letting me be a consultant or go down to 20 hours a week, or, the non-for-profits that you are currently supporting through the company foundation, subsidizing me being more meaningful to that organization 1 or 2 days a week. Unfortunately, the onus is going to be on the employee, and that's a scary experience. Given that we go through market cycles where, unemployment rate is below 4%, and then you could turn and you could end up in a situation like during 2008 or the pandemic where the unemployment rate is very high. People were just afraid to take that risk. But where I've seen the most success is those people who are willing to come and take that risk. They usually get what they want, and they do very well. It's just, a lot of people go, how do I have this conversation? So we have a conversation, and I point them to maybe an employment lawyer or something that they want to talk to. But you have to start the conversation from a point of value, telling the organization why this would be good for them.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. What's in it for them? It's marketing 101.
It's marketing 101. And
entrepreneurial thinking. It's being creative and thinking about what is the gaps here? What is the solution I can bring to bridge that gap? And it's not how employees have been taught to think.
That's exactly right. You've been sort of like that assembly line I talked about. You've been conditioned to fall in line, right? And this is going to require some creativity on your part that may be very well received by an employer that's maybe thinking the same thing or open to thinking about it, but just cannot take the risk from a policy standpoint of getting it wrong if they approach you.
Absolutely. Well, and there's still a lot of bias and myths to be overcome in terms of ageism, especially in the workplace. Things like employers don't realize that older employers or older employees bring far higher emotional intelligence, and therefore culture tends to go up, or the satisfaction level of the employee base goes up, and they create a better culture when they have people with high emotional intelligence, which tends to be older workers, and therefore there's less turnover and so forth and so on. But they don't think about those kind of related benefit?
Typically not. There are a few innovators in the space. Eli Lilly and I think Procter and Gamble was part of this joint venture. They put together a program where they bring back their retired managers and scientists. They basically say, you pick your schedule and you pick your terms, and it's an innovation lab. And they have been wildly successful of the things that this group comes up with, and they're appreciative of the fact that they get to hang out with their buddies, but they get to define work on their own terms. And this is what really people are looking for. A lot of people say, well, it's a binary choice, either you're in or you're out. Most people don't want to be in an in or out situation. What they're really trying to do is to get more of their terms, and you got to figure out where you agree.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about, let's talk about the financial side of things, because I think that's important. And I love that you brought up the idea and the option of defining a new role for yourself, for the organization. I like to joke that I've never gotten a job that was ever posted. I've never used a resume because I've always approached organizations when I have worked in companies. I've been entrepreneurial most of my life, but about every 7 years I forgot and went, ooh, benefits and stability, oh my. And I'd go and create a position or a role that didn't exist. You become a category of one, and you don't have to compete with everybody else if you're doing that. Versus just being part of all the people throwing their hat in the ring. So I think that's a brilliant idea. Hope you guys caught that. If you're thinking of what now, that is an option. Create the job you want.
Correct.
Go and pitch it and figure out what's in it for them, make a viable case, and chances are good you can create a new role on your terms. So speaking of entrepreneurial thinking, before we go to the finances, right now, the largest cohort to ever come into the business world in history is happening, and no one's paying attention. Boggles my mind. There's never been a larger group because so many boomers and Gen Xers cannot afford to retire. 65% need to continue working or making money. And so they don't really have any option. Ageism keeps them out of the workplace.
Right.
So they have to become entrepreneurs, but they've been employees with an employee mindset their whole life.
Right.
They now have to shift. And for those who have a growth mindset, they can learn and grow. For those who have a fixed mindset, which tends to be a fair number of people, it can be really challenging. Did you, in your research, do kind of any digging around that transition? How do people go into becoming an entrepreneur? How do they make that leap? Was that any part of your?
Yeah, so I want to take a step back and just kind of explain a little bit of psychology, because I think it goes hand in hand. And so this is where we have to pay attention to our multi-generational workforce. And so just like ageism is real for people who are early Gen X and baby boomers, and though there may be some folks that are still in the silent generation, they're still in the workforce. I think millennials and Gen Z get tagged with some stereotypes too, right? And I think what is best is if we all learn from each other. So we tend to think of Gen Z and millennials as people that may be a little bit selfish, that don't have commitment. Nobody stays anywhere for 30 years and gets the gold watch or anything like that. But I think there's something to be learned. And so I think, especially millennials, what they watched, especially in periods like 2008, is they watched an implied contract between management and labor get broken. And so there were downsizings, there were layoffs, and they watched their parents and grandparents go through that. And they said, why am I going to give all of my value to an organization that may devalue me at some point in time? And so what occurred is, if I were to go to the academic research, is kind of like this protean thinking. And what that is an understanding of how to negotiate for yourself and create things on your own terms in terms of what you want. So now you will see, before you would see someone go into an organization and say, hey, I want to be CEO one day. And they're going to stay and they're going to think about a mobile career going upward. And a success is defined based on how far you can go up the ladder. All right. That is no longer the definition of success for a lot of people. A lot of people are thinking more in terms of protein activity and saying success is me being able to see my kids' soccer games. Or if I really desire to be a CEO, what I'm looking for is the skill sets that people I'm looking to build the skill sets that a person looks for in the CEO. And that doesn't necessarily mean I have to stay here for 30 years if I'm not getting what I want when I want it. It may be I go 3 years in marketing here, 3 years in finance somewhere else, 3 years in leadership somewhere else, 10 years somewhere else, right? And so that's a long way of saying people who have that level of confidence score high in two things. There are a number of other competencies, but in terms of meta competencies, the two things self-awareness. So they're willing to critically critique themselves and be honest with themselves, as well as they have to be very mobile. So I'm not going to be afraid if I have to pick a job in another state or an opportunity in another state. Okay. And so back to your earlier question about, how do you frame this thing in terms of retirement and entrepreneurship or whatever? There's a lot we can learn from watching younger employees who have that level of confidence, who are not afraid to go out and be contractors, who are not afraid to start a company in their garage. And a lot of this goes back to kind of role theory too, right? It was for a number of us that are approaching this stage in our lives or in this stage of our lives, our careers and identity, because career is identity, it's part of it. We're not really always shaped by things we really wanted to do. I mean, a lot of us are in careers because it was socially acceptable. Our parents wanted us to do these things, right? And so it wasn't until recently where you said it's okay to start a company out of your garage. And so we don't have this level of confidence or awareness about ourselves. So I think that's where you start is you have to be intentional about developing the skill set.
I love that, and a lot of the distinction in there, and a lot of the I hope a lot of people heard the different framing on how to look at millennials and Gen X, because there is a lot of reverse prejudice, especially older people around, they don't have the same ethics and yada, yada. But your point is loyalty is a two-way street, and that doesn't exist anymore. It's a myth. It's an old, outdated thing. And so they are really very practically dealing with the marketplace as it is, not how we used to think of it because it used to be different. So I really love the being intentional around developing self-awareness. So that's an internal personal growth and professional growth process. And also, how do we become better risk takers? How do we become more flexible in our attitude towards trying new things?
So what I often liken it to is boomers and older employees may say, you're not loyal if you can't stay anywhere for whatever the defined period is, right? Varies with the industry, but whatever the defined period is. And to me, I think careers have turned into, and we need to look at professional athletes. I always draw parallels to professional athletes. You can play a whole career with one team. It rarely happens, but you can do a whole career. But you've got to remember that 10-year career, 15-year career is a series of renegotiated contracts. That contract is going to expire every 3 to 5 years. And I think this is where millennials and Gen Z have figured this out, is every 5 years, we're going to go through an acquisition, a new restructuring, and whether we may not be aware of it, but our employer going through all of those periods is reevaluating, do they want to sign this contract? It may not formally happen, but indirectly, this is what is happening, when you get a layoff here or a down cycle or something like that. And so I think millennials and younger employees are more thoughtful, and every 5 years, I got to do the same thing on the other side of the table. I got to assume that me and the general manager are sitting down and you pick the period, and we're going to have conversation about, do we want to be together? And if all goes well, I may have a 20, 30, 40-year career somewhere, but I have to recognize it's a series of renegotiating every so often.
Well, and I think how I just visualize that in my head is that they do growth through leaps, whereas we were trained to do growth through incremental advancement.
Absolutely.
Very linear and followed one track the whole way, whereas they do leaps to see how they can accumulate the skills and experiences, not experience, both,
Right.
to create the life that they want, not to create necessarily what they should be doing. And that's a big distinction between the two. We can learn a lot about what people might call life balance, work-life balance, but really I just call it, they're clearer about who they want to be and what they want the quality of their life to look like. And they put that ahead of all the other considerations.
Correct.
Second, whereas we were taught to put everything else ahead of our own desires. So I think you're right. There's absolutely a lot we can learn. And even in terms of innovation, they bring a perspective in terms of kind of blank slate, anything possible without they don't throw the past onto the future. And older people, context and experience with trends and things. When those two come together, it's powerful innovation. If either half is missing, it cannot be as comprehensive in terms of the innovation. So it's good to
so as we talk about boomers, and I would love to do further study on this, but one of the things that I found in my study was that they're actually among younger boomers. Mm-hmm. And these would be people who would have started their careers in the 1980s. There is a split. Some have more of this protean orientation than others. And when I started to talk to people on what is that attributed to, we had a global recession in the 1980s. And there were some people who were able to maintain their place within their organizations, and they had the 30-year career and they were insulated and all that. And there were some who were displaced or came out of college and couldn't find a job and all of that. And so they had to learn the skill sets that currently younger employees have. Right. And so although it was very frightening, uncomfortable when they were disrupted, in the end, they actually developed the best defense mechanisms to be able to pivot and transition. And therefore, this part of life is less scary to them than someone who is always taken care of inside of a system, even though maybe they got more in terms of stock options and maybe they got more in terms of benefits or a better safety net. But in terms of being able to defend themselves and go into a period of time where they say, you know what, this isn't working for me. I want to be an entrepreneur. I'll figure it out myself. They never developed that skill set. And so going into retirement, and once you start hitting the stage where you want to redefine yourself, a lot of that personal freedom comes by you being your own boss. What I find is the people who were disrupted earlier in their careers, experienced a layoff or whatever, are way better equipped in making this transition than others.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an absolutely cool insight. And I've literally written down 6 different topics for articles as we've been talking. And the last one was really interesting. The point that made me think that, a lot of times we think, and there's a lot of talk about developing resilience, both, at all ages, but that especially older people need to develop more resilience in order to carry on. But really what it is actually is an ability to reinvent or revision, the ability to create a revision what's possible in the future.
Right.
And versus resilience, because resilience has an element of resistance to it, or it can have, versus the ability to adapt and flow, which is really what we're talking about. Right. There are so many things I want to talk to you about. It's so fascinating to get this from kind of a more academic perspective and to hear all the options. But let's just very quickly touch on the financial side of things, because that is your background and it would be dumb not to take that into account. Tell me, we mentioned 65% can't afford to retire. The other 35%, conversely, hold the most wealth of any demographic in history. 79.5% in the hands of boomers and Gen Xers right now. Never before in history has that been the case. So we've got lots of wealth and ability to do things, and lots of, I call it a global poverty epidemic. If 65% of the population had cancer, we'd probably get on that curing cancer thing, but not so much with the getting on dealing with the fact that 65% of the people are between food and housing insecurity and simply can't live the life they want to live without creating, generating revenue. As a financial planner, let's talk about what people can still do if they are 55, 60, 65 to support themselves financially. And specifically, the 65% who can't afford to retire, what are some options? What are some ways for them to think about money differently than they probably are?
Well, we can rattle off a long list of things, right? But before a person gets to the point where they can execute on those things, they actually have to believe that they can be done. And the interesting thing about where we are right now is people who are entering into this phase of life are now pioneers. And so one of the things I write about in my book, and I'm stepping back a little bit, this will lead into my answer to your question, is as I mentioned earlier, the problem with retirement in the past, it was studied through the lens of gerontology. So what it basically said, when we had shorter lifespans, we were advancing from middle age to old age. And so now we're living longer. And so middle age does not now transition into old age. It transitions into, in academia, what is called the third age. And it's fairly new research. And then the third age goes into old age. And so what is the third age? The third age is a period of time where you have completed all your obligations to other people. And I know the people are sandwiched in, so that may not be as clear for some as others. You're smarter than you've ever been. Even if you're ready for financially for retirement or not, you have more resources than you ever had, right? And you have this long time span where you're healthy, where you can do and be whatever you want. So the first thing I try to do is get people to understand, and what I like to push is what is called financial self-efficacy. And what is self-efficacy? Well, it's a cousin of self-confidence, but the difference between the two is self-confidence are things that we believe in, but we can't change. So I believe the sun is going to rise in the morning in the east and is going to set in the west, because for the 50 plus years of my life, that's what it's done. All right. But I have no control over whether that happens. What we have to get people to understand is financial self-efficacy is you understanding what you can control. And a lot of people have more power than they know. Okay. And so when you sit down with someone and you're having this discussion about finances, they go, I can't afford to retire. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so when they develop their financial self-efficacy, they realize that the skill set that they believe that they've created in the workplace or through academic training or whatever, when you marry that with the network that they have developed among their friends and family and business and wherever, and you add in a couple other components, gives them a very powerful network that they can advocate for themselves through. So you may make that pitch to your organization. They're like, nah, that's not interesting to me. But what you have is valuable to someone somewhere. So I often think my uncle, before he passed, he had a trucking company, and he was going, what makes my company run every day, believe it or not, is my mechanic. Okay, I have a mechanic. He's 70. I let him come in, 20 hours a week, but I could send the truck down the street. It's going to cost me 3 times as much as this guy can do it. Same thing as I went into a business, and a guy had a print shop, and he was like, I hired this guy. He's 75. He knows more about this printing equipment than anybody because he's been in the business the longest. So we don't realize how much power we yield because we think that only one subset of the business world values it. But what you have is valuable to someone somewhere. So getting back to the financial discussion, what we also talk about is ways to pivot. So in the event that you get into this situation and you find out that your expenses are going up, or you want to do more with your leisure time. How do you get there? You have a power to go back and still earn. And this is where I think evolving business models are wonderful. I know PhDs that drive for Uber and Lyft, whether they need the money or not. And most of them don't need the money. It's just more like they want the social interaction every day.
Yes.
Airbnb, plug and play, right? All of a sudden, so there are a number of ways you can create this income stream for yourself in the event that you get out here and you get stuck. So that takes some of the fear and anxiety away. The other thing I think is going to happen is that the model for retirement is going to change for a lot of people. So I often tell people, look at the show The Golden Girls. I don't know if you get it. I think you probably would get it in Canada. The series retired a long time ago. Sorry to use that word. But I think, I don't know, I would love to interview the creators of the show, but they were really ahead of their time. And I don't know if they recognized what they were doing. But when you look at that model is what's going to be needed for a number of people. And that is, and a number of universities are adopting this retirement learning environment. So there are a number of universities and many of them in the South, they are places where their alumni like to snowbird. And you don't have to be an alumnus of these institutions to be there. But basically, because we have dispersed, when it comes our time to do this, our family may not be around the way they once were 20 years ago. They're all over the place. We're all over the place or whatever. So one of the things from a socialization standpoint we got to get better at is we have to learn how to figure out how to develop friendships to replace kinships, because social interactions are very important. So a lot of people go back because I don't know anybody, I have a small family, I don't have many friends or whatever, but I do have affinity to this school I love, and we'll go move into this community, and instantly I got a bunch of friends because we have something in common. What has happened is in these university environments, this has been a great place for people who want leisure. This has been a great place for people who don't want leisure because they can go to lectures every day, they can get a job on campus. This has been a great environment for people who score high in what is called generativity, meaning that they like to mentor younger people because they can go in and be a guest lecturer or tutor or talk about their careers. This has been a wonderful environment. Now, going back to the Golden Girls, why is that important? What happened in this, there's a lot going on in this house that most people don't recognize what's going on in this house. First of all, they have gone, similar to the university environment, they're four in a house, so they can split the overhead for living, which is that and healthcare are your largest expenses. Mm-hmm. Number two, there's a great deal of socialization there. And as we know, when we have socialization, that increases our longevity and keeps us healthy, right? Which takes away from a lot of the expenses from chronic illnesses and depression and things like that occur. So you had, there was always something going on in this house. So they were having lots of fun, lots of joy, lots of laughter. And then the other thing that people need to recognize as I talk about replacing those kinships with friendships, it existed both ways. So you had Sophia and Dorothy who were of kin, but you had Rose and Blanche who were not of kin, but you never would have known it because of the relationships that they had with themselves if you talked about how close in proximity they were from a social relationship standpoint. So we need to figure out how to develop those types of models, and that helps with the expense side. Develop financial self-efficacy so that we realize that our earning potential isn't gone, it just needs to be restructured. So that helps with the revenue side. And so those are just a couple of things that will contribute to people having a longer, healthier retirement in this environment where there are fewer safety nets.
Yes, which are being taken away daily as we, right now, which is scaring a lot of people. And I really love the advocacy for self-efficacy so that we take put ourselves back in the driver's seat rather than thinking that we are, screwed and throwing our hands up and going, there's nothing I can do. There are lots of things, and those are two brilliant examples. So I could talk to you literally all day. As you can tell, we've gone quite long. Tell me where people can find out more about you, where they can reach out to you for both financial information. So let's start with that. Can you service anybody in the US, anywhere in the world from a financial point of view?
I have clients, some of everywhere. I do have clients that are in Canada, both Canada, U.S. and Canadian residents. I service clients across the country. So usually the distance isn't a factor. As long as there's some tie to the U.S., we can work with you at our firm. The other thing is, if anybody who wants to learn more about me, there is a webpage for me and my firm, Mesirow.com. Just go to Gregg Lunceford. I think you will have a copy of my links there. Anyone who wants to learn more about how we work with clients, one of the free giveaways we give is our retirement guide. So anybody who checks in can get my retirement guide. And then also on the website is a link to all of my publications. So some of the things that I've talked about today, if you want to read about them from an academic or practitioner standpoint, or just plain we've done some articles that are just very much down to earth, layman's terms. Don't want to scare anyone away. There's something there for everyone who's curious about this topic.
Loved it. Okay, and tell us the name of the retirement guide and how do they get it exactly?
If you go to our website, I think there's a link in the right there.
Okay.
If you use that link, it will take you right to our retirement guide.
Okay, awesome. And tell us very quickly, what does Mesirow mean? Is that a person? Is that
That's the founding family that started the business over 85 years ago.
Okay, and it's spelled, just so if you're looking for this, it's Mesirow. So Mesirow. And then you'll find it. So Mesirow.com, and look up Gregg there. Get in touch, especially if you'd like some financial advice. And by all means, grab his book. Obviously, it's going to be full of great information and food for thought around exiting from work and all the various different stages. Even if you've already retired, there is going to be information in there that will be helpful for you. Because as we both know and talked about, 1 in 3 people who retire struggle with mental health issues because lack of meaning and purpose now in their life. And so more and more are coming back to some version of reinvention and work and contribution. I like to just basically call it contribution, because if you're an entrepreneur, you're contributing. If you're doing volunteer work, you're contributing, whatever it may be. So Gregg, I know there's lots of things that you can advise people on and help them with, but what's one piece of advice you'd love to leave people with, especially those who are perhaps thinking, this is a terrible, scary time. What do I do next? That whole who am I now conversation, etc. What would you like to leave people with?
Just one, I want to jump back. My book can be found on Amazon.com. And if I were, one thing I'd love to leave people with is, and I've touched on it a little bit already, is that you are more empowered than you think. This seems scary, but actually the third age, or this stage of your life, is the best stage of all the stages. Is better than early adulthood, is better than your young. You're wiser than you've ever been. You have completed all your obligations to everyone, so you can pick whatever it is you want because that's right for you, not because you need a certain income to take care of your responsibilities to others. You can go wherever you want. You are the architect of your future, and it is a lot of fun once you draw the plan out and begin to execute.
I love it. You're so speaking my language. You are the architect of your future. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're really hearing that and taking that to heart. It is absolutely a time where we get to decide. After a lifetime of putting everyone else first, we get to say, it's my time, and I choose who I get to be, what I get to do, and what I get to have. So thank you for, I'm just still making notes about articles to write. So lots of food.
Well, I hope I get to read a few of them. Yeah,
I'm gonna send them to you. Thank you so much for being here, Gregg, and thank you for the work that you've done and
you're very welcome.
Dive in this area, because I think it's so needed for people to have a more hopeful perspective, a more balanced perspective, one based on real, obviously deep dives and research, and to really be encouraging of people at this age and stage as we redefine what it's going to look like, because
you're welcome.
Not who we used to be. And life is not how it used to be. So it's an opportunity, I call it, to, reinvent how we age, sage, and live at this stage of our life. So thank you for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
All right, everybody, please do go and check out his publications, his book. I'm going to go buy it right now. And if you have questions, go and reach out to him on his website, and take to heart that you are the architect of your future. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. I'd love it if you left a comment and subscribed. And I encourage you to apply one aha from this interview right away so you can turn your wisdom into wealth and your contribution into positive change. Bye for now.